Hello and welcome to this video for Sprintax non-resident tax overview for J1 au pair participants. In this video, we're going to help break down some of the core tax obligations and filing obligations for J1 au pairs. So as you'll see in this overview, we'll look at tax responsibilities for J1 au pair participants. We'll look at J1 au pair specific considerations to think about when it comes to your US tax obligations. We'll look at your end of year tax filing requirements, who needs to file and what documents do you need to file at the end of the year with the IRS. We will touch base on how Sprintax softwares can help in setting you up correctly if you are going to be on payroll or employment, as well as looking at year-end tax return filing support. So I suppose the first topic we'll jump into in this video is tax residency. And generally, J1 au pairs are automatically considered non-residents for tax purposes for 2 tax years in the US. And I suppose very simply, non-resident for tax purposes means that different tax rules and laws will apply to you versus, let's say, your fellow American citizens or residents for tax purposes. And you'll need to file different tax forms with the IRS at the end of the year as a result. If you surpass that 2-year period, your days will then start counting towards what's called the substantial presence test. And that will then determine your tax residency. It will count all of the days of presence you've spent in the US for the current year. It will add that to 1/3 of the days of presence, 1/3 of the days of presence in the US the year before that, and it will add those days to 1/6 of the days of presence from the year before that. If it totals to 183 days or more, you'll generally be deemed a resident for tax purposes. When it comes to federal income tax rates for J1 employees, when it comes to au pairs, your wages will typically cover domestic services in a private home. So whilst they are taxable, they aren't generally subject to mandatory reporting on Form W-2, 1042-S, or other payment documents. So as a result, au pair wages are not exempt from tax, and au pairs are required to file US income tax returns at the end of the year. However, it is very important to keep records of the payments that are being made to you by your host family. And what we would recommend here is, because your host family may not withhold taxes on that pay that you're receiving, we recommend to set roughly 10 to 12% of that income aside for when you're actually filing taxes at year end, as it would be likely that you might owe taxes at the end of the year in most cases. That is something that Sprintax software can assist with when it comes to filing your tax returns. Sprintax software can help to prepare those returns for you. When it comes to au pairs and tax treaties, unfortunately, there are very limited cases where au pairs have tax treaties. A tax treaty might help to, reduce a level of tax withholding or exempt certain amounts of income from any tax withholding at all. But as mentioned, there are very limited cases where au pairs do have tax treaties. Now, au pair income is treated as dependent personal services, income code 18 by the IRS, as it is work performed in a private home. However, there are only tax treaties possible for au pairs whose country of residency is Canada, Greece, CIS countries, Jamaica, and Trinidad and Tobago. And treaty eligibility will be based off a number of factors, including but obviously not limited to things like visa type, income type, duration of time in the US, as well as the type of payer or employer. So when it comes to the end of the year, in terms of tax filing obligations, you might be thinking, who will need to file a tax return? Well, simply put, at a minimum, every J1 au pair that is a non-resident for tax purposes, an exempt individual, they will need to complete at a minimum Form 8843 if they were present in the US during that tax year, regardless of whether or not they earned any US source income during that tax year. If you were present for even a single day, you will need to file Form 8843 for that tax year. Then in terms of who needs to file an actual federal tax return, the rule there is very simple. Any non-resident who have received any taxable earnings or income over $0 will have a federal tax filing requirement, which is the 1040 NR form. And do note that the tax filing season is for income earned during the 1st of January through to the 31st of December of the year. The tax filing season won't begin until typically January of the following year, and the tax filing deadline is usually April 15th, unless that day falls on a weekend or holiday, which in that case will generally fall on the Monday after that weekend or holiday. Importantly, when filing tax returns, if you have received income documents during the tax year, you will need to use that information from those income documents. If you were on payroll or W-2 income, you would typically receive a W-2 for the previous tax year within, typically they'll get issued out by January 31st of the following year. So if Ryan was working in year 1, he'll typically get his W-2 for year 1 in January of year 2. This outlines wages, salary, and compensation from the tax year, as well as any tax that was withheld on it. A little less likely is the 1042S. Typically, you might get this within March 15th. This might cover things like taxable income exempted by a tax treaty. It might outline prizes or awards, as well as taxable scholarships. And then 1099 series, these income documents cover things like rental income, investment income, or independent contractor services. Now, as an au pair, it's very likely that you won't receive an income document. You'll likely get, payments made directly to you from your host family, but it's really important to keep records of those payments that have been made to you throughout the tax year. So try and maybe keep a separate Excel aside that outlines what pay you've been receiving for each week or period that you are getting paid for. When it comes to year-end tax filing requirements, Sprintax is a software that is specifically dedicated to helping non-residents prepare and file their federal and even state tax returns. So the Sprintax software will help outline federal returns, state returns. It will prepare Form 8843. You may also be eligible for federal e-filing, which would allow you to electronically file your tax return to the IRS. We can help with FICA returns if you have had FICA taxes withheld in error. This is much more likely if you are on W-2 income to perhaps occur, but you may not have FICA taxes withheld when you're getting direct payments from your host family. We can also help with amended tax returns and filing returns for previous years. So you can get that on the Sprintax returns site on sprintax.com. Sprintax forms then, if you are being set up on payroll or set up for W-2 wages, this software can help to figure out and understand your pre-employment tax forms if you are going to be set up on payroll as an au pair. So this helps to understand your tax residency, any tax treaty eligibility, FICA exemption, and helps prepare the Form W-4, which is a pre-employment tax form typically completed when you're getting set up on payroll. Important to note that this is separate to any end of year tax filing requirements. It's a separate software to tax returns, and you can see here the link to access Sprintax forms. And then the difference between Sprintax returns and forms. Sprintax forms prepares tax documents prior to employment, such as the W-4, treaty documents, looks at residency and FICA exemption, whereas the Sprintax return software prepares your year-end federal and or state tax returns for the income you earned during the tax year. So as I always say, you can use Sprintax forms to prepare for employment, and you can use Sprintax returns to complete your end of year tax return. So if you do have questions on our Sprintax softwares, you can always reach out to our live chat team on Sprintax. There's also lots of educational videos on our YouTube channel and our blog, but I hope that this au pair specific video will help guide you through the tax year ahead and prepare you for the end of year tax filing obligations. So thank you very much, and hope you found this session helpful.